almost pressed every wrong button. Took me like 6 different. No. Anyway, hi everybody.
Hello.
Wednesday, 2nd. Been 2 weeks since we've last done this. And it's time to start a new book.
Is it ever?
This is the Extra Credits Book Club podcast. Dekker, always is Nightmother. And we started the book Six of Crows today. Not today. We started it a couple days ago, but we're talking about it for the first time today. And this book takes place in the universe of a book that we've already read. Separately.
Did you finish it?
Yes.
I wasn't sure if you had or not.
I got like halfway through it.
Yeah, that's basically it. That's basically the whole thing.
Because I was reading it on stream on Fridays.
Right.
As a lark because it was not good. And then we watched the show.
Yeah.
And that was not.
And that's the point where I was like, I'm going to read the whole trilogy. And I did. I knew what I was getting into. But I did anyways.
The show also blended the first book with the book we're talking about today.
Yeah, so timeline-wise, the events of Shadow and Bone happen 2 years before the events in this book. So they created like a separate narrative for the characters of Six of Crows so that they could be involved in the show.
And it seems to be, it's essentially the same plot. They've just rearranged the details.
Fully. Like, still a heist, but the object of the heist is a different person.
Right.
But, like, same, like, setting for everything. Same conveniently placed party.
And this book employs the Game of Thrones method of storytelling, which is every character gets their own chapter.
Yeah, and I don't know how. I feel like it's not being used very effectively. Like, most of the time, it's never to give you any information about the character whose, like, view you're seeing the world through. It's just like they're a witness to whatever dialogue is happening outside of them.
Right, and I actually made a note during one of the characters' chapters where I said that why was their first chapter, this character's first chapter, was an entire chapter about someone else.
Yeah, and like we know more about him than we do about like most of the other characters, and he's so irrelevant.
Oh boy, I can't wait to talk about Kaz. But this is supposed to, like, where Shadow and Bone is sort of like a pseudo Russian, like Russia from the pre-World War I.
Zarpunk, she calls it.
Wish she would, because it's not.
She, I think, even italicized the word in a Q&A.
Wish she wouldn't, because when you say something like Zarpunk, it springs to mind steampunk, which is Victorian but cool and futuristic. And there's
more goggles.
Yeah, there's nothing cool or futuristic about this series.
No, it's literally just like a reimagined Europe, basically, with like some different borders. Like Ravka, where Shadow and Bone occurs, is like Russia. And then they mention like Fjorda, which is basically Norway.
Yeah. the
And then they
Norwegian
have
country.
but this story takes place on an island called Kerch, which apparently is inspired by Amsterdam, Antwerp, Las Vegas, London, and Old New York, aka New Amsterdam. That's straight from the author.
Right. But
It gives me more like it's like it's like she really liked Peaky Blinders and was like, but what if I fit it into my world
yeah, like
that I've already made?
I did not get Amsterdam. I did not get any of the other Antwerp or New Amsterdam or any of that. I got. It's like she scooped up Whitechapel when it was being ravaged by Jack the Ripper, and then just
Yeah.
said, "But it's not that."
Yeah, and also like Birmingham, but not that either.
Right. It's so much effort is taken into not describing Kirch at all,
Yeah.
and we're just supposed to take everything at what she
Like
says. Like it is literally just like disgusting Victorian or Victorian London and gross.
yeah. Like if there's a map on the inside of the book and it's literally like this tiny little island down here. So like Ravka is here and then this is Kerch and Ketterdam is like at this northernmost part. And then there's one other city. But
Right.
she relies on the map to explain what she doesn't.
And I think the only reason that she even pretends to say, "Oh, it's Amsterdam," is because it has brothels.
Yeah, because they're like decriminalized. But
It's
they're like
you can just say like prostitution's legal. That is allowed. You can do that.
I think she just wanted to be unique. She was like, what's close enough to like England, but I can say it's not. It's like because
Right.
I'm unique. So it's like Antwerp, you know?
Yeah. But the first chapter, a character gets his own chapter called Juiced.
Yeah, is it juiced or jost? Because it's spelled like juiced. But I listened to the first chapter. I can't remember.
It is said juiced. Jost. Even
That's
though I
it's
immediately
just like
assumed
both.
his name was used.
Yeah, you would think so, because like shouldn't all J's be silent? They
But
are sometimes and also then not.
yeah. But this whole first chapter is one of those like opening gambits where you're just kind of like thrown into it. You're thrown into the middle of a ongoing scene
Mm-hmm.
where a Grisha, which is this universe's mage, essentially.
Yeah.
They can do magic. Being given something.
Yeah. Is
And
it
then
worth like describing who the Grisha are and what kinds of orders they come from, or do we care?
I suppose. I mean they've got the I forget the names, but they have like you're born with this magic. I believe they call it the small
Yeah.
is very
But it's kind of I think at least she puts more effort into describing the magic system than fucking what's her face Carrie Maniscalco does. Like because so there's like four different factions, I think. There's
She
so
just keeps
most
inventing them.
Grisha, yeah, most Grisha belong to a single order. It's like whatever power manifests itself for you, that's kind of the order you fall into. So there's the Corporalki, which are healers, heart renders. Heart renders are people who can like control your emotions and your moods, and like
also
stop your
just like
heart.
stop your heart.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if the
or
patient
like,
strikes.
or I think they can like control your blood flow as well. Like
Yeah, because you can like create bruises on people and shit too. Like,
it's really nebulous.
yeah.
It
Then
seems to
there's
just be
whatever the purpose needs to happen.
whatever Leigh Bardugo needs it to be.
As long as it's about a body,
Yeah.
then sure. Then there's the Etherealki, which are summoners.
Yeah,
So they have
fire.
Squallers, Inferni, and the Tide Makers.
Right.
And then Materialki, which are Fabricators, Durasts, and Alchemy.
Right.
So they're
People who
like the
make
people who
clothes,
make fun shit. Yeah.
armor, weapons, I suppose. Too.
Mm-hmm.
They're
And
the fabricators are the ones that are described the least in the Shadow and Bone book.
they kind of become more important later on, like in the other two books, like David especially, because they can make the amplifiers that like Grisha will wear to like make their powers more strong. But they are the ones that are doing any of like they're like in an org structure, they're like the innovation team. Like they're working on new
R&D.
shit. Yeah, exactly. That's fabricators.
Yeah.
And in Ravka, the Grisha are like kind of revered because of everything that happened with like the Darkling and the army that he raised and all that shit. But he did a lot of like rebranding for Grisha in Ravka so that people like not they didn't like worship them, but they like looked up to them and held
Right.
them in a high regard. But that's not the case in Ketterdam. I think in Kerch and Fjorda, Grisha are like reviled and in some cases hunted.
Yeah. In Fjorda, they're definitely like persona non grata. Like if we see you around these parts, you're going to jail and you'll be
Yeah.
killed.
Yeah.
But in Ketterdam, which is the city in Kerch where the book takes place so far,
Hmm.
they don't care.
No, but they're not really seen as like
No.
people of high status. Like not they don't live in a palace the way they
Right.
used to in Ravka.
But
Most of them are indentured servants actually in Ketterdam.
yeah, it seems like, and this is a really weird piece of world building that I don't think Leigh Bardugo particularly thought through, if that makes sense, is that like everybody seems to run away to this place, Ketterdam, and then contract themselves out into into indentured servitude, and then go,
Yeah.
oh my god, how am I ever going to get out of this? And I'm like, you didn't have to do that in the first place. Like you
Yeah.
made a choice to
It's
put
so
yourself in
weird.
this position.
And they're acting like none of them at any point ever knew that they were essentially like willingly selling themselves into servitude. It's
Even
like
though,
the way
yeah,
it's described. It's
they
like they found out sometime later, like months into it, and they were like, "Ah, fuck.
like
How'd this
when
happen?"
they first talk about it, they bring it up like, I'm fine, like, it would be so nice to get out from under my contract. And then they
Yeah,
talk
my
about
dad.
when, and then they talk about how they were just like, yeah, sign here, next page, okay, right here, all right, great,
Yeah,
thanks. Like,
very
so you wait, you
strange.
knew? But anyway,
We're not really given a good answer about that.
right. The first chapter, we see this like, forget which Grisha it is. I think it's a heartrender.
The one who is in the boathouse,
One of the very
she's yeah, she's a heartrender. I
and
think. Yeah, because
it,
there was yeah.
yeah, and they're like, there's a bunch of people gathered around, and they're like, give it to her. We've got this. I keep trying to say Jumja, but that's Bajoran Jumja, not like Jurga or.
Well, we don't know what it is yet.
Well, no, they mention that he's like, have you ever heard of Durga?
Oh, Jerda.
Yeah, that's it.
I thought we didn't find out the name of it until
No, I
later.
remember. I've got a note here. No, I don't. Later. You're right. But
Because
anyway,
we know that a drug is involved, but it's like this
yeah.
nondescript thing in like an envelope, I think.
Yeah, and they just kind of like give it to her, and then she goes crazy and kills everybody. Chapter's over.
Yeah, basically. Like Juiced, he is like a guard's he's like part of the city guard basically. He's doing his rounds and he of this like rich merchant's or the city councilman's house. And he has a crush on this Grisha named Anya, probably. Um, and he's looking for her. She's not in the workshop where she normally is. And then these other two dudes come up. They're like, "Hey, come to the boathouse." And Juice is like, "I thought the boathouse was closed." But they're like, "No, just trust us. Like, come with us." They go in, and there's this whole like demonstration set up. And there's this Grisha in like a glass. The way that this is described is not very good. But it's because I had a really hard time picturing it. But it's like, in my mind, it's like this boathouse, and then in the center is like a little glass box.
Yeah.
And in the box is the Grisha and this like young boy. And he gets his arm sliced and she like heals it up by touching because that's what like a lot of heart renders have to do to heal. They actually have to touch you. And then Hode, who is the city councilman, comes in and he's like, "Okay, now you have to just consume what's in this wax envelope." And she's like, "Okay." So she takes it. She's immediately high as fuck.
Yeah, zonked
They
out of her mind.
they slice this guy's arm real deep, and she just dismissively waves her hand, and he's good as new. And then they're like, Hode, the counselor dude, and like all of the people, they're like, "Behold, look at this great power." But then she immediately turns on everybody. Her eyes are like purely black pits, and she tells all the guards to wait. And they do. And then she tells Hode to pick up the knife. And she tells another person to shoot the glass. And that's essentially like the end of the chapter.
Yeah. Very suspenseful. And I was like, huh?
Yeah. Juiced's last thought is, "She's beautiful as the moon." And then he never thinks again.
That's right. We get an entire chapter about a character who not in the book.
Yeah. I know more about him than I do about anyone else. Because it was just like all of his musings in the first bit. And like we've had 2 chapters with Jesper. I don't know fuck all about Jesper.
Now, there is a really neat aspect of the audiobook. I don't know if you read or listened to all of it,
Some of it, mostly just for pronunciation.
but every character has their own different narrator. I thought that was kind of neat. But that was before it got confusing and off-putting. Because it's very disorienting to go from these chapters where, wait, which voice is this? Because the narrator for Inej and Nina way too simple. But our first chapter of the actual characters in this book is Inej, which I spelled as Anej first. And then I realized that that's not how it's.
That's close though. Like you only got 1 letter wrong.
But immediately I was struck by how generic Inej is. In terms of, if someone were to hand you a D&D character sheet for someone that just somebody whipped together for a assassin rogue, it's this person. And it's so disappointing just how generic it is.
I had such high hopes too because like I was watching I'm an avid scroller of book talk. And I've seen a couple book reviews and everybody was like, "Oh my God, Inezha's my girl. Like she's so fucking badass." And I was like, "Great. Cool." But
Can't wait.
she's
She
very
is
cookie cutter.
in Book Talk's defense. She's badass for people who wouldn't know what that's.
Yeah, she's badass for people who are used to badass being like Feyre.
Yeah, yeah, or whatever the fuck the character from Kingdom of the Wicked is called.
Emilia.
Right, block that out. But one of the first things that we're introduced to with Inej is how she has names for all of her knives, and immediately I was like, yuck! Yuck! I hate that. That's so cringe, dude. I can't stand because it's so tired. Everybody who thinks that their assassin character is special and unique has like named weapons. Like they have all these special cutesy snowflake names for their weapons, and I'm like, it's a tool. It's not your fucking friend. Cut it out. And
Yeah,
like
that's fair.
setting them all out on the bed and like Sarah and Johnny. Here's Tobias. And it's
Tobias.
like, oh my god. This is so and I didn't know how cringe it really was. Because later we find out the names of the knives, and I'm like, ah, this is
Yeah. Well,
worse.
they're named after saints because she's like religious and stuff. So
So
she picked the worst
fucking
saints though.
cringe. There's where's my note on that? Because I wrote a fucking diatribe.
I feel like you're also naturally predisposed to people naming inanimate objects things in general.
Yeah, I the only exception is we'll take Lord of the Rings for example. Very special weapons in that world have names,
Hmm.
but those names are given by the person who creates it,
Right.
not by the girl who's like, I'm gonna be so cute and clever by naming my instruments of violence after saints. Isn't that fun? No, it isn't. It's very Route One.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, yeah, I understand what juxtaposition means. Thank you very much. But she's as she's laying out her special cutesy saint knife the bed and like counting them to make sure they're all there. She's going out on a little sneaky time ish. I think.
Yeah, there's a big like parlay happening at the exchange, which is apparently modeled after Amsterdam Stock Exchange, but it's like neutral ground for all the gangs of Ketterdam. And she belongs to Kaz Brecker's gang called the Dregs. And they're on their way to go meet this guy, Giels, who's the big boss man of another gang called the Black Tips. And the Black Tips have been causing shit for the Dregs for the past year in their like territory called Fifth Harbor. And Kaz isn't sure like or we don't know where his head's at, but they're going to have a negotiation to basically tell the Black Tips to stay the fuck out of their territory and come to some kind of agreement. And Inej is always the person who's like on the rooftops watching
Yeah.
it all go down. So she's like the backup. Her like fun gang name is Wraith.
Again, very unique.
Hmm.
There was one thing that I noted when I don't know if this is after the parlay, but there was a point where it's written where Inej says something, and then after that, where usually after dialogue it says said or replied or whatever. But after this, it said Inej thought, comma, but didn't say. And I had to write that down because I was like, yes, that is what thought means. You don't have to tell me that she didn't say it if she thought it. Because if she did say it, you would have said, she said.
Yeah. Good to make that distinction, I guess.
So weird. And also, the other members of the gang are like waiting in the wings in case anything goes wrong, so they can like bust in and start shooting. Because
Yeah, he has.
this is a fantasy world. Everybody's got pistolas and guns.
Yeah, he's got his seconds. Kaz has his people as his seconds. I think he has this guy named Big Bollinger and Jesper. And none of them can have guns while they meet in the middle of like their neutral territory. And Giels, when they get there, he starts going off about how he has all these city guards on payroll, so Kaz better behave, or Giels will get them to shoot him, and Kaz is like, fucking do it. Shoot me right now. Like, they don't even talk about anything. Kaz immediately just starts demanding that Giels shoot him if he's so tough. And it kind of all falls to shit for Giels.
The whole parlay scene is very weird because it felt like it was dependent on us having knowledge of Kaz's reputation, because he just goes in there and he goes, I'm the hottest swinging dick in this city, and if you want to try anything, fucking try it. Give me your best shot. And I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? Who does he think he is?
I know. He's like a 17-year-old. He reminded me, like, the way that he's described by Inej and by like the book is like, I don't know if you ever read the Artemis Fowl books as a kid, but he reminds me of Artemis Fowl. He's basically this infallible child, like, crime savant who's just like a genius for crime and how to manipulate people. And I feel like that's Kaz. Because
but he never. The problem is not that he is a child criminal savant, as absurd as it's that we're told he is all the time, and we never really see him do anything, like, because he's sort of described as like this Machiavellian puppet master where he just tugs a string and something he wants happens. But we're just told that he does those things because otherwise he's like not. He just kind of seems to fly by the seat of his pants. Like,
well, he's always like at least 5 steps ahead of everybody in any situation. But the thing is, like, that unfolds for us as we're experiencing it. We don't get to see really like the inner workings of how his mind operates. And so there's a disconnect between like the things that happen when he gets into like an action situation, like later on with the boat, or like in this situation where everything unfolds according to his plan. But all the other characters are like, as usual, Kaz never told us his plan. So it doesn't feel impressive because he's there and the things happen, and then afterwards Kaz is like, yeah, I planned all that. And I'm like, okay.
Like, you can get away with something like that for this scene because it's the first introduction to him, and you can have him be like, aha, you've fallen into my trap, and the trap after that. But when we are with Kaz from this moment until we stop at chapter 11, he has like moments throughout this 11 chapters where he's like, aha, just as I planned. And it's like, when did you have the time to fucking scheme that out, you little shithead? Because And he has contacts, but clearly there's no phones, so he can't just ring somebody up and be like, "Hey, I'm working on something. I need you to be ready this time, that time, and the other time." He's just like, "Don't worry, I've got contacts." And then they go straight from him saying that to the thing he needs to contact the guy for, and the plan is in motion. I'm like, what? What kind of quantum level communication does this world have?
Maybe he just has like really fast pigeons.
Boy, oh boy, it's wild. Also, I got really confused in the chapter because Leigh Bardugo took an entire bucket full of names and poured it on my head.
Yeah, there are so many gang names, gang member names, and like a lot of it is Inej basically letting you know that she knows everything about all the gangs, their weaknesses and strengths, and like she has all these reservations about why Kaz is choosing this guy Big Bollinger to be his second in this parlay because she's like, I don't really know this dude. But then when Giels and Kaz are having their like face off, and Kaz is like, shoot me, pussy, you won't. When finally the shot comes from the rooftops, Big Bollinger falls over and Giels starts looking very uncomfortable. And Kaz is like, oh, this isn't going to your plan, is it? And then we find out that Big Bollinger had a fucking pistol on him the whole time, which would have been impossible to conceal. So they find out that he has been betraying the fifth or the dregs and giving all this information to Giels, and that's how they were able to fuck with them this whole time. And Kaz is so cocky about demanding to be shot because he went to the city guards that Giels bought and was like, by the way, you're mine now because I have all this blackmail information on you that we never find out about. And Inej gets to the guard that was gonna shoot Kaz right in the nick of time and like has a knife pressed to his back. And so it all basically ends fine. Kaz is like, don't ever talk to me again, bitch. And then they leave and they just leave this guy who betrayed their gang to like bleed out in the streets, more or less.
Yeah. Which, this brings me to one of the things that kind of bothers me about all of this. This happens a couple times over the course of the portion that we read. Is that there is such a thing as over designing things. A lot of the schemes and plans that we read about in these 11 chapters are so vastly over designed that it's like, okay, there's a shorter and more clever way to get there than what you just did.
Yeah.
Because instead of like taking a very clever route to what they want to do, Leigh Bardugo goes here, then there, but around here, taking the long way, another scenic route up the top, then this way, and then down again. Oh, we're back where we started, but not try. Nice try. We take a little shortcut to the end result, and I'm like, but you just could have done that.
Yeah. And
And
then like the thing I hate the most though is that they're like, and that's why they call Kaz old dirty hands. It's like that's the best you could do.
so
That's his like Hyde persona. They're like Kaz Brecker was gone and dirty hands had come to see the rough work done.
there's also a line that made my eyeballs roll straight out of my head, and it was that Kaz says, I'm a businessman. And someone said, no, you're a thief. And he said, that's what I said. Like, oh, God, please,
Yeah. I
don't
like
do
that
this.
his clothes are described. It's like he wears like tailored suits. He's a very like finely dressed young lad, but it's like all to as a mockery of like an upstanding mercher or whatever.
Right.
They're like all the crime lords love their gaudy fucking, I don't know, paisley vest. I imagine a lot of purple satin is involved, but not Kaz. He's all sharp lines and like wool coats and probably a bowler hat.
Yeah. Someone who's listening to like MC Hammer, and then when they get caught, they're like, I listen to it ironically.
Yeah.
No, just say you like it.
Yeah.
Because if you're as tough and scary as everybody says, if you say, "Yeah, I like wearing suits. I look fucking dope in them," they'd be like, "All right, geez, okay, damn,
Yeah.
all right, whatever you say, big guy."
Yeah, just say it's not your palette to wear the gang colors. It's okay.
Or I'm, people don't respect me unless I wear this stuff. There's 1,000 things you could say other than it's a like my fashion is a statement against like capital. What are you saying? Shut up.
Yeah, it's a suit.
And also, he's got a cane, which is the cherry on top of the mustache twirling cake.
Hmm. But it's not just for show. Apparently, he's a little crippled. We
Got
don't know why.
bum leg.
Got a little bit of a limp. Yeah.
That I don't think is actually explained until other people start mentioning it. Maybe I missed it.
It's basically like when Inej is watching them go meet, like have their little gang meeting. Uh, she's like, "Oh, Kaz's limp is more pronounced tonight because it's cold out.
Right.
His his joints."
Um, Something I did notice about Inej before we move on to the next chapter is that I was really confused because she complains about being the sneaky assassin killer rogue, but almost in the same breath says that she loves doing it.
Hmm.
So I'm like, do you like it or not? Like, is this
I
your
think
calling or do you hate it?
I think it's her calling and she knows it, but I think part of her like longs for more like prestige within the gang. Like there's a few moments where she's like she gets jealous of Kaz choosing somebody else instead of her,
Right, that
and she's
happens a
like, "Why
couple
can't I be
times,
there with Kaz?" Yeah.
which is
So maybe
weird
it's that.
because she does complain about that stuff, but also she's like, I would leave the first chance I get.
Yeah. She probably just has a crush on Kaz that she hasn't acknowledged yet.
I mean, yeah, obviously it is Leigh Bardugo we're talking about here. But the next chapter is Kaz, and my first note for this chapter was how was Inej's chapter entirely about? Very cool.
Hmm.
Uh, I also hate the guy who reads Kaz's chapter.
I heard his voice. It's upsetting.
It sounds like a combination of the guy who does the voice of Hayden from Mass Effect,
Hmm.
and also the guy who does the voice of the main character from the new Deus Ex games, Elias Tofexis. I think that's how you pronounce his name.
I don't know.
Uh, he's got a very Montreal last name, but I
Yeah.
think it's Elias Tofexis. Elias, if you're listening, please let me know. And it's not a bad voice, but I think it's bad for this character.
Well, his voice is described as like being quite distinct in a number of instances where it's like gravelly and like or raspy almost and like cold, and he sounds more like Shepherd. I thought we had something.
Yeah. Let me know if you need anything.
Yeah.
Uh, but this whole chapter is like 4,000 words on just how cool and tough and smart and clever Kaz is.
Yeah.
And my notes reflect that. I have 4 pages of notes. Uh, And a lot of it has to do with me really not being able to. I cannot suspend my disbelief when they say that Kaz turned up in this town at 10 years old, joined a gang at 10, and now has this criminal empire at 17. I'm like, stop! Let's do some math. That can't be possible. You cannot build a reputation and an empire simultaneously in 5 years. In apparently the hardest city in the continent.
Yeah.
It's outrageous.
I know. And there's like ways I guess you could like mental gymnastics it to be like, well, like the turnover for gang leaders in this town might be a couple fiscal quarters, like things move very fast here in this city of crime, like
Right, sure.
but it
Even
doesn't
though
like
everybody who's in charge of the gangs now are like old men.
yeah, well the actual gang leader of the dregs is this guy called Per Haskell. And all he likes to, he's like this old dude who just is like, yeah, Kaz, run with the gang. He thinks things still work the way they did when he was in his like heyday, but all he really likes to do is drink warm beer and like build model ships, I think, in his
Yeah.
little office. And Kaz, who joined the gang, a mere boy of 12, is now running the entire city.
I can't get over it. It's going this is going to be an element that sticks in my craw. Well, they're leaving. So maybe that won't be an issue. Because
True.
by the time we get to chapter 11, they are leaving Ketterdon.
Mm-hmm.
Which is fine by me, because the less I have to hear about his fucking crime empire, the better. Um, there's also a line I wrote down here that I couldn't believe that this was written, and it's when he said, "Greed bows to me."
Yeah, I
I
know.
was like, "Shut up! You don't even know what that means." It just sounded kind of cool.
I know. Another thing that didn't really allow me to suspend my disbelief was like how he owns this gambling den, the Crow Club, and he talks about how he like can appeal to like all of the debaucherous needs of like these grown ass men. And it's like, you don't know what those things are. Like, you haven't had enough time to like really
Yeah,
come shoulder to shoulder with like your shadow self and like
and the
really
way,
explore the like how depraved people can be. Like
yeah,
at 17, I don't care if like you were a 12-year-old gang member. Like I just
I
how does
likened
he
it.
go from that to like having a gambling den that's like the second most successful gambling den in a city of gambling dens
Right.
and brothels?
And because it was fresh in my mind, I likened it to Kaz is Quark if Quark was Nog,
Yeah.
which is outrageous. It's outrageous.
Mhm.
Like, you cannot be a fucking master of industry before your balls drop.
Yeah.
I don't care how much you sit in the corner like Strider from sitting in the Prancing Pony, just like sitting in the corner smoking your pipe watching people. It doesn't work that way. You can't just watch your way to success.
No.
I also noted that all of these characters sound, act, and are written like some of the laziest D&D characters I've ever seen.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
they're just generic, like pre-made characters that someone, like the DM, you show up your first time, and the DM is like, "Yeah, I've got pre-made characters for you. I wrote them on my fucking day off. Here you go. You can use that one." And it's just like, con artist rogue, assassin rogue, uh, gunslinger cowboy with a gambling problem. Like, wow, you really stretched the limits of creativity with these character types.
Yeah.
But I think at this point, he's told either he's beat up by a ghost.
More or
He's
less.
walking home from the parlay and he gets beat up by a ghost.
Yeah.
So he thinks.
Yeah, he sees a man walk through the wall, and then I think
And he
he
goes,
gets either
"A
like
ghost!"
whacked on the head. Yeah, he's like, Jordy.
Yeah.
And then he gets like, does he get bonked on the head?
He gets roughed up. And
Oh, he gets.
only after he gets roughed up, he's like, "Is this a ghost?" And I'm like, "No, ghosts don't fight you, dude. Think about it."
Well, we don't know that. But he gets knocked out by something called whooped salts, I think. Or do they use whooped salts to revive him? I have to find this out. But I read that
It's
and
to
I was like,
revive him.
stop it, stop it. So it's like smelling salts, I
Yeah.
guess. But they call them whooped salts.
He gets a clobber on the head. He wakes up at
In like a basement. A
FedEx.
nice basement, like an office.
Yeah.
He wakes up, he's tied to a chair. He's like, "Oh no, am I being arrested by the Merchers? Well, guess what? Who cares? Because I have so much information about all these bitches. Like, no one can imprison me." And they make it sound like he's a combination of like Thomas Shelby meets like Varys from Game of Thrones. Because
Yeah.
why does he have so like who gives him, who are his sources? Like
It's
usually with someone.
everyone.
Yeah, it's like if we have a spy master character, they like to talk like cryptically about their sources, and we don't get any of that from Kaz.
It's Varys from Game of Thrones, Sherlock Holmes and his army of fucking homeless children.
Yeah.
Who he just like Sherlock Holmes just swings open his window and goes, "You there, boy! Go hang around the docks. There's a shilling in it for you." And also like his supernatural ability, like as soon as he wakes up and realizes that he's tied to a chair, he's like already planning how he's going to manipulate people he doesn't know he's being held by.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
He-
you can't do that. You have to know the person you're talking to before you can do that.
Yeah, I think he figures it out kind of quickly though, because the man has a watch on, like the man behind a desk, I think, sitting across from him. He has a watch with like some kind of seal or like crest, and he recognizes it
Right.
as Van Eck's crest. But he's still like, it's almost like he knows that before he even sees the watch. And then he's like, immediately, I know who this is. And he's like trying to make small talk with this dude while he like breaks himself out of his like handcuffs or whatever.
Yeah.
But
and
this is where we find out about like the purpose of the book, basically.
Yeah, and it's so weird. Like this guy, Van Eck, gives Kaz the bonk of all bonks, brings him to his house, and says, "I need you to steal something." And Kaz is like, "Ha ha ha ha, okay, what do you want?" And he's like, "Have you ever heard of, I wrote it down, thank God, Jurda Parem, which sounds like a Vulcan dinner party." And he's like, "I've heard of Jurda. It's like a little fucking chewing snack."
Yeah, I think it's like cocaine.
It's a
Almost.
stimulant, yeah. Like it's something you chew
Like
to,
cocaine when it's still a leaf, kind
yeah.
of.
Like it doesn't get you high, but it's sort of like a chewable
Gives you a little
coffee.
pep. Yeah. But it stains your teeth orange, which is very gross.
Yeah. And he's like, "Well, what if I told you that this Jurda Parem can make Grisha do shit that they have never been able to do ever?" And Kaz is like, "I don't care." And I was like, "Okay, hold on. Let's pause here. Why why would a group of merchants give a shit about super extra powered Grisha when they don't seem to care about Grisha at all?
Well, specifically, it's because one of the examples Van Eyck shows Kaz about what the Grisha who have been under the influence of Jurda Perem can do is they can literally turn lead into gold. And
All right, I
he
forgot about
talks
that.
about like I think he says perhaps you've heard of the Shu paying off the entirety of their debt to Kirch with a sudden influx of gold, and then there was the assassination of this ambassador from like Navyazem. I don't know how to pronounce it because I've never heard it said out loud. And like the theft of documents from a military base in Ravka. So the Merchers as a coalition are worried that the world markets will collapse if, because like the Shu government is essentially feeding all of these Grisha Yurta Perem and getting them addicted to it because it only takes one dose and getting them to turn lead into
Right.
gold, and then they're like gonna take over the world, and it's just like trade, the exchange, everything. The markets will crash, stonks. Like,
Right.
so
Reminds me
Kaz
of
is like, oh,
you remember the Red Letter Media video where I think it was like Alien Private Eye? It was that drug that if you took it once, you were hooked for life. But if you took it more than 5 times, it would kill you. But less than 5 times, and you could beat it.
yeah,
But
yeah,
the first time, you were hooked for life.
yeah.
That's what it reminded me of. I was like, wait a
That's
minute.
literally this. And like they talk about how the way like it allows the Grisha to like do types of magic that they wouldn't normally be able to do. Like the ghost who hit him on the head is a tide maker. Tide makers can't walk through walls, but apparently high as fuck tide makers can kind of do whatever they want,
Yeah,
turn
they
their
can turn
body to
into
mist.
mist.
Yeah. And so it's essentially like Grisha, like super cocaine mixed with LSD.
Yeah,
Because it like breaks down these barriers in their mind and allows them to like do things they never thought imaginable. Like they say they can make connections with extraordinary speed. Things become possible that simply shouldn't be. And it turns out one of those things is turning literal lead into gold.
yeah.
And so the guy who discovered the effects of Jurda Perem, his name is Boyer Bayer.
Boyer. How is it spelled?
Bo is his first name, and then it's YUL hyphen BAYER. Boyle Bayer. Oh no, it's a U, not an E.
Boyo Bayer.
Bayer. Yeah, he's a scientist because he is being held by the Shu government, or he was at least, but now he's being held by the Fjordans.
Yeah.
And
Again, Leigh
but he
Bardugo, this is over designed. This is way more complex than it needs to be.
right, okay, so I think he's a Shu, and then he basically was he was begging Kirch for asylum and saying he was going to defect to Kirch.
Yeah.
Because he's concerned about the Shu's plans, but somehow now he's being held at the Ice Court, which is this impenetrable fortress in Fjorda. And so the point of Van Eyck's proposal is like, I need you and your little gang of miscreants to go to the Ice Palace, this impenetrable cake-shaped fortress in Fjorda, rescue Boyle Bayer, and bring him here to me.
Yeah.
So we can keep him safe. Because they
And
think he's going to be
also,
executed in Fjorda.
so we
But
can
also, like,
get
if he
that.
dies, who cares?
Yeah.
Isn't that the whole point? They don't want them to make any more of this shit.
They're presenting it as we don't want anybody else to use the formula that could wreck the economy, but really it's we want the man who can make it.
Yeah, true.
And then there's so much just blabbing. They don't shut the fuck up for a second. And most of it is taken up with this over-designed explaining horseshit. And finally he's like, okay, I'll do it. Because he's offered 20 million Kruga. And then Kaz, imagining in some wild reality that he's in a position to negotiate, says, make it 30.
Well, Vanek starts at 5, and then Kaz goes from 5 to 20, and then goes to 30. Like, Vanek doesn't even try and negotiate because he's a despy boy, and he's just like, okay. But he's not happy about it.
And I was like, you're
he, like,
tied to a
doesn't push
fucking
back.
chair.
Yeah, well, he springs out, like, almost immediately and holds, like, a knife to this guy's throat.
Oh, yeah.
And then he's like, give me my gun and my cane back so I can feel like a powerful boy. And then he's like, then they find out that they're at Hode's place, the setting of chapter 1 with the poor little guardsman boy who was always concerned about not being able to grow a mustache and his crush on the Grisha girl. They go out to the boathouse, and literally all the guards that were told to wait there are still waiting and just kind of like casually dying, including poor Juiced. And now they're like, we don't really know what happened to Hode. He carved off his own thumb, but we don't really know like what he's up to these days. But Anya like fucked off, escaped, but then because she was hooked for life after one dose, she got back in a little boat and tried to get back to Kerch and like drowned.
Yeah,
trying to come back for more drugs.
Such a flimsy explanation. I was like, I would lay money that she'll be back.
You don't think she's dead?
Because it was such a hokey explanation of why, or maybe she was just making it so that she, like, don't worry, she's not coming back to the story. She's not actually important to the story because now she's dead.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I made a note because, again, I thought that this was incredulous. It's like a 3-paragraph tirade in my notes about how he's a career criminal by 10. And by 17, he is such a massive player in the crime world that he's being like the Merchant Guild is essentially coming to him with a geopolitical problem for him to solve. Get fucking real. This is outrageous.
Yeah. But also I'm like, do they actually think they're going to succeed at this?
Why would
or are they
do it?
like I don't know.
If
like,
they thought why would they offer to spend 30 million bucks to have a guy that they weren't positive would succeed? Like, granted,
well, if they don't succeed, they die, so he's not going to have to pay it.
But even still, why would you bother to have someone go fuck it up?
I guess because they're not necessarily, because Kaz isn't connected to the Merchers in Ketterdam. He's just some kid with a lot of influence and resources. Maybe it's like he does, by sending him and his gang, they're not implicating themselves. They can be like, oh well, he just did this on his own.
Right.
But I don't know, it's still flimsy because why would he? Like, what's his motivation?
There's no real reason for something this potentially like super sensitive on a geopolitical scale to be handled by someone that they are only half confident in.
Yeah, well, he makes some kind of reference at the end about like, I guess Vanek is really impressed with Kaz and his gang because at some point they like stole a painting from him. There's like that reference at the very end of the chapter, being like, you don't know anything about that painting that was stolen out of my impenetrable home, would you? And Kaz is like basically saying that he did it without saying that he did it.
Right.
And so I think like he recognizes like the reputation of the dregs and whatever, but I don't know. It's still it's just an excuse for a heist. We needed a heist. Here you go.
It's wire thin, but Leigh
Yeah.
Bardugo, I'm with you so far. There's also a point where they mention a heart render. And I understand that for the context of this book, they needed to explain what a heart render does. But I made a note that I said they're called heart renders. I promise you don't have to explain what they do.
Yeah.
That's self-explanatory as all get out.
Yeah.
But anyway, the next chapter is Inej again, where she goes back to the Crow Club, question mark.
Yeah, she's got to fire a dealer who's been skimming money from the Crow Club.
Right. And she confronts him, says, "You've been skimming, so take a hike." He's like, "No, I haven't. Fuck you." And then he tries a bit of the grab assin'. And she like beats the living hell out of him.
Yeah, she like puts her little brass knuckles on.
And I made a note where I said, I never thought I would say this, but it's nice to finally see a woman in fiction using violence as a deterrent to harassment. Because so often in books like this, when a woman is harassed, they're like, oh my god, this is so horrible. And the solution is to fucking break their jaw. Because she mentions that nobody fucks with her.
Yes.
Because she breaks jaws if they do.
Yeah.
I was like, yes! Do that more.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, she's uniquely skilled.
True.
I think a lot of characters who get harassed in books are just like regular people who don't have a set of knives named after saints.
Also, based on the books that we've read for this show in particular, a lot of those women would love to be harassed. Which is so gross and toxic in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Stop writing that stuff, you guys. Stop.
Yeah, it's gross.
Stop it.
It doesn't do anyone any good.
Certainly not me. But he gets after she beats him up, he gets chucked out on the street.
Yeah.
And then Kaz turns up. Of course, when all the hard work is done, he turns up and he's like, "Oh, good. You took care of that for me? Thanks."
I think he asked her to do it. And she was like, "Why me?" He's like, "I got stuff to do."
Yeah.
She's like, "Okay."
And then she starts fretting.
No, he was going for a walk.
He was gone longer than like 5 minutes, and she starts fretting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of when I zoned out. Like, I don't know that I paid attention to the chapter particularly.
It's pretty short. Basically, after Inej fires and punches the shit out of the dude at the Crow Club, she goes back to their like shared home. I think they call it the Slat. And it's like, in my mind, it's a very narrow, tall house with lots of tiny like compartments where people are sleeping and shit. So she she goes up to her room and then she hears Kaz come home. And she sneaks down into this closet that she knows has like a grate above Per Haskell's office because Kaz is going to go speak to him. And so she's basically eavesdropping while Kaz tells Per Haskell about everything that just happened at Van Eck's place. And he's like, listen, I'm going to do this heist. I'm going to get 30 million Kruger for it. Get this other dude to run the gang while I'm gone. And Inej is up there being like, why not me? Why can't I run the gang? I don't want to, but why not?
Oh, yeah.
And she's basically just like eavesdropping. And then afterwards she talks to Kaz about it. And she's like, what, you got jumped? Oh my God. I can't believe you can't let anybody know. It would be really bad for your brand. He's like, yeah, I know. Yeah. And then is this when he like washes his hands in front of her?
No, he
or is that later?
He splashes water in his face and then he whips off his shirt and Inej is like, God. And I was like, yes, of course. I wouldn't be one of these books if a woman couldn't handle the sight of an half-dressed man.
Yeah. She's just like, my word.
Yeah, I can't
But he like
believe it.
he's always described as like being very fastidious about wearing gloves all the time, and there's all these rumors around why he does. They're like, oh my god, I bet he's got demon hands or whatever, and or like really bad hand acne scars or something. And then he's like washing one of the only people who ever sees him gloveless is Inej, I think. And it
Yeah,
seems like he has like a weird clean thing, but specifically with hands. But we don't really know anything about it. Like there's another moment later on that we'll get to where he gets really upset about someone's bare hands.
touching it.
Yeah.
Um, but then it's another Kaz chapter, and I made a note. I forget what brought it on, but I made a note that it's after the other two young adult fantasy novels that we've read, Kingdom of the Wicked. So
Your court of thorns and roses.
yeah, I said it's refreshing to read a book where the world is sufficiently built. I said, granted, this is like the fourth or fifth book in the series where this world has existed. So
Yeah, the fourth.
Leigh Bardugo has had plenty of time to think it over. So this is probably the sum of all of her ponderings. But that being said, it's still nice to have a world that's actually built.
Yeah. Because honestly, like even Shadow and Bone had much better world building than fucking Kingdom of the Wicked, which had none.
That's true. And I don't remember what happens in this chapter. I just know that being really put off by how often. This is the fifth chapter, mind you, dear viewer. The fifth chapter, and I'm already sick of how often this book is telling me how fucking clever Kaz is. And
That's essentially
what a genius at crime he is.
that's essentially the content of chapter 5. Like Kaz is kind of walking around the area in the city called the Barrel, which is there's two canals,
Okay,
East
hold on.
Stave and
Is
West Stave.
Barrow? Like a
Barrel. Like a barrel.
because that's literally
Not
one of
like
my
Thomas from Downton Abbey.
that's
Not his
literally
name.
one of my notes is Barrow? Barrow?
Yeah.
Barrel? What are you saying?
Barrel with an L. So we get a little bit more information about Kaz's gambling den, the Crow Club, which is still bumping at 4 a.m. And then we find out about Kaz's arch nemesis, Pekka Rollins, and his club, the Emerald Palace. And it's really the only real competition for the Crow Club. And he talks about his slow siphoning away of Pekka's investments brick by brick, which is his little criminal mantra. And then he talks about how he was 9 and his brother Jordy was 13 when they came to Ketterdam. And Kaz talks a lot about like if he gets this share of the 30 million Kruga, he'll finally be able to put his dream into action. And genuinely, it just seems like his dream is to ruin Pekka Roland's life.
It seems more than that. It just seems like he just wants to make a lot of money.
But at the expense of Pekka Roland specifically, I think. Or if he can do it that way, that's the preferred method. But
Right.
he's like, okay. So there's a lot of references to something called the comedy brute, which I might be grossly mispronouncing. But it's basically like their one piece of like pop culture. But they talk about I looked it up. It's a troupe of performers apparently in the city that have these very recognizable characters. But it's like anytime costumes are mentioned or festivals are mentioned, people are like described as wearing costumes from the Comédie Brute. I don't know.
Is that even in
Is it
Shadow and Bone?
important? No, this is the first time I've
Oh,
ever heard it before. But they're just
yeah,
talking about it like it exists.
yeah. I noticed that. And I'm like, am I supposed to know what this is? Is this in the other books? Turns out, no.
No, the first time. But he's basically like on his way to through like the pleasure house district,
Yeah.
and he passes by all of them, including one thing we haven't mentioned about Inej is where she was before she joined the dregs. Like before her debt was bought by Per Haskell to be in the dregs, she was in a brothel called the Menagerie working there. And she was basically like rescued from this brothel by Kaz and the dregs. So now her debt to the brothel was taken on by Per Haskell. Now she's paying Per Haskell down for her debt. That's why she can't leave. But he goes to this one pleasure house called the House of the White Rose to meet with Nina Zenik, who's a heartrender.
Right. And she's acting as like a sort of pseudo psychiatrist, where she's
Yeah.
just kind of like bending people's moods to be better.
Yeah, just
And
feel better.
and I hated that I was not pleased when I was writing down my note when I said it's really impressive that Leigh Bardugo had the wherewithal to have Grisha doing things other than being mostly useless.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I genuinely, truly like the idea of a heartrender acting as like a psychiatrist bending people's moods. That's actually clever.
Yeah.
Good job. And then they said that Nina's 17, and I said, stop! Leah, not everybody in this book can be fucking 17.
Literally every character in the Shadow and Bone trilogy and every character in this, they're like 17 and under. Why? Why? Hey, you can make him 22, 23. That's
Yeah.
still a baby. Like, it's like people are still gonna read it. Like teenagers are still gonna read it.
It's like no one
Like, why do you think they have fucking 30-year-olds playing teenagers in teen dramas? You know, like just say they're in their 20s. It's okay.
It's like no one told Leigh Bardugo that when you have these characters have sex, this is making everybody complicit in a crime. Stop. Make them 18, just 18 to 25. That's it. You
Yeah,
can still
you don't have
have
to
them
say
be
how old
you can
specifically.
have them
Either.
be super young, is 18 to 25, and we don't have to read about children having sex. Thanks.
Yeah, please, for all our sakes.
Thanks, appreciate it. But Nina is the worst character in the book.
Yeah, so far. I hope. Well, I don't know. We have a character later who I fucking hate, to be honest with you. The poor boy whose life she ruined. He's kind of a fucking downer, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
But
He's
do
just
I
as
understand
obnoxious.
that killing, like, I understand his motivation. Murdering her would overtake my sensibilities as well. Anyways.
And you know what didn't help is that the lady who's reading Nina's chapters has the same annoying nasal drone as Jane from Daria. You know, Daria's friend.
Yeah. It's no good.
It's horrendous. And it makes the character just all the more unbearable. Yeah, I mean, like, I love Jane as a character. Like,
Mhm.
both of her and Daria are great. But when you put that voice on a bratty, obnoxious bitch, I want
It's no
those
good.
chapters to be over very quick.
But basically, Kaz goes and asks her, like, hey, do you know anything about this drug, Jerda Parem? And she's like, no, what the fuck is that? And he's like, well, I have a proposition for you. And she's like, well, what about all the times I wanted help getting with Matthias? Is that how they say his name?
Matthias.
Matthias.
There's no
Okay.
H.
Oh, it's a silent H.
Is it
Um,
spelled with an H?
Yeah, Matthias.
They don't say it with a T or with an A.
Okay.
It's Matthias.
I should have known that from the show, but we watched that like a long time ago at this point.
Yeah.
But he recruits her because apparently he needs a korporalnik. And they also need Matthias, who has a history with Nina, but is currently being held in a prison called Hellgate. Because of course he is.
Very cool.
So
Yeah, so they're
like, we gotta go break him out.
And this is another part where I was like, wait. Hey, you mean to tell me that this 17-year-old boy came up with this clever plan on the spot to bust this fuckhead out of prison, and it went through, like... Leah, you better chill out with this shit.
Yeah, because, like, we don't know. They don't give us any indication.
Shit.
Yeah, like, the only defensible piece is that they don't tell us how much time has passed between his conversation with... Also, I like how I'm saying they. It's one person. It's Leigh Bardugo writing a book. She hasn't told us how much time has passed between Nina and Kaz talking and
I can only
them
assume
heading.
It's minutes. As long as it took him
They go straight to the prison after the conversation.
As long as it took him to walk from the Pro Club to Nina's place to the prison.
Yeah, except he was thinking about other stuff on his way to go talk to Nina because we were with him that whole time. So
look, people, he's just so I don't think you understand how good he is at what he does. Do we have to tell you a couple more times? Because we will.
Yeah. So many like convenient external factors have to happen though for the plan to be executed.
This is something that happens with every plan that he has. There are an incredible amount of very convenient external factors.
Yeah.
And they even try, like, there's a chapter with Jasper where they try to lampshade it and call attention to it. And I'm like, nope, that just makes me notice it more. Because he's like, is he really planning this stuff? Or is he just going full ass luck build? But this whole prison thing was dumb. Also, as an English major and a literature major, Nina, no, not Nina. Nina is victimless. Leigh Bardugo uses the word fishes.
Where?
In this Nina chapter.
And
I wrote it down in very big letters. Fishes is not a fucking word.
To describe fish?
Multiple fish.
What? Oh my god.
She's describing the plural of fish and says fishes.
Gross. Shouldn't do that.
Legal.
I am only a mere English literature minor, but I still know that that's no good.
As a professional writer, she should know too.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, they go to this prison, and apparently they had to dress up.
Like they were going to a masquerade.
But it was just like a gladiator style fighting arena where prisoners would fight beasts determined, not unlike we determine what books we read in this in this podcast.
Yeah, they have a big ass wheel. I know, I was thinking that.
And then whatever horrible beast the wheel lands on is whatever beast the prisoner fights.
Yeah.
And
that's actually like a good like analogy for how we pick books.
Whatever horrible beast it lands on.
Yeah. And it's called the Hell Show. Which is like, come on.
Leah, I just gave you credit for doing pretty good world building. Don't let me down now.
Mm-hmm. And naturally, Matthias is fighting in it.
Yeah.
Oh, and this is where we find out that he was something called a Druskell.
Skella.
A Druskella, okay. Which is a witch hunter tasked with hunting down and murdering Grisha. And they have like, but to Nina, he'd always resembled a warrior saint illuminated in gold. And I wrote, okay, bud.
Whatever, dude.
It's got to shave about 10 to 15% off there.
But the plan, because Matthias goes into this arena and gets absolutely fucking mopped up by some wolves.
But he does kill them all.
Yeah, but he does not come out the other side looking too good.
No. And what I found kind of rude about this was like Nina was like, "Oh my god, like you don't understand. Kaz, let me get him out of here. Like wolves are sacred." I was like, "What the fuck? Wolves are sacred specifically to witch hunters? Like did you ask the wolves if they hate witches?" Like
No,
they're just kind of like
just to the
coerced into
Fjordans.
this like but specifically with the Druskella.
Oh.
I went back and double checked because I was like, is it just Fjordans in general? But no, they like fight alongside witch hunters, and it's like they don't know. Don't co-opt them for that.
Yeah.
But Matthias is like almost like he's like dry heaving as he's fighting. He's not, but in my mind he
like,
was. He's like my sacred animals.
Yeah. He's doing that like that crying so hard that you're like ugh!
Yeah, that's exactly what he's doing.
But he gets beat up and he's unconscious and they drag him back and then they make their way into his cell and Haz's plan is to make another prisoner look like he has firepox, which I imagine is a debilitating virus.
The lupine strand.
Yeah, that
specifically.
wolves.
Because did you know how good of a planner Kaz is?
Yeah. A random wheel that selected wolves. And
yeah.
He thought ahead. But anyway, he was going to make this guy look like he had firepox. And then take Matthias. And then just leave this guy in there so that when they came in and saw this guy, they're like, oh shit, he's got pox. Throw him in the quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
And then they wouldn't check up on him for like a month.
Yeah.
And that was their plan. And I wrote down one of the dumbest and most baffling lines that I've seen in this book so far. Kaz says, make him look like he has firepox. And Nina replies immediately with, you want me to make him look like he has firepox? I said, for Christ's sake, that's what he just fucking said.
Yeah.
Nina.
She's like, I've never seen firepox in real life. All I know is that it looks exactly like this. And he's like, perfect. Do that.
Anyway, we get a part 2 now. Part 2 of like 5 parts.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
Something like that.
But it's our first Matthias chapter. And immediately he wakes up and starts choking out Nina. And I was like, yes! Kill her!
Yeah.
He's ready to strangle the shit out of her.
Mm-hmm. He has been traumatized by
Nina, and I think
in some regard.
And I think deep down, he's mad because she tricked him into having sex.
Oh, 100%.
That's
He
why.
was a pure virgin boy
Yeah, and
who
she essentially forced him to have sex with her, and now he's like, I will kill this woman if it's the last thing I do. I
but
was
it's
like,
not like,
yes,
okay,
that's the kind
did
of
he
vengeance I live for.
well, true. But part of him is like, God damn her and her fucking wily, sensuous, redheaded
Yeah,
ways. Like,
those.
I still want her. Like, he's talking about how he's got like, he's always dreaming about her, and he either has good dreams where he kills her and bad dreams where they fuck. And he's like,
Yeah,
God damn it,
it's a that
my
constant
mortal
like,
loins.
I can't stand her witchy ways, but
Hmm.
goddamn those ample bosoms and absolute fat ass.
Yeah, I think she's described as being shaped like a figurehead of a ship with carved by a generous
Generous hand.
hand.
Yeah,
I
that's
actually
exactly what
liked
I was
that.
thought. So I was like, so she's got absolute door knockers.
Yeah.
Copy that. But this Matthias chapter is so obnoxious because all of it is spent with him going, I can't stand her. She's the worst. And everyone's like, all right, calm down. We'll get to that in a minute. We need you to work for us. And he's like, no. The last thing I'll ever do is work for you. And he's like, but what if I gave you a pardon? Okay, I'll do it. But I won't like
Immediately.
it.
Yeah. They're like, can we just get you out of the prison first, please? He's like, I'd rather stay here and die a born again virgin than ever come do anything for you and betray my country again.
Yeah.
But they
Like
get him out of
he's
the prison.
yeah,
They
they get
do
him
it.
out and then convince him to help. He is like, oh, all of these children around here. I can't believe it. They're all children. And I was like, okay, tough guy, how old are you? And then he says that he's 18. I was like, oh my god. Of course. It's always the
Yeah.
one who's 1 year older than everybody else. It's like, oh, I'm surrounded by mere children.
Mm. You
Shut
guys
up.
don't know the worldly ways of someone more experienced than you. But the reason they need him is because he knows like the layout of the ice core and like all the particularities about like the gate systems and shit and like how it's laid out and how to get in.
Yeah.
And then we also find out that because like okay, there's a part when Kaz first meets Van Eck where there's this offhanded sentence that you can tell was thrown in later. That is like, and of course there's the mystery of Van Eck's son. Nothing said after that ever again.
Yeah.
But then we get here and it's like we solved the mystery of his son because they have a demolition expert named Wyland who's been in the gang for like way longer than the period of time between Kaz and Venek having this conversation and now this heist planning.
Yeah.
So like was he just like mentoring? Does he have one of every Mercher's sons kind of in the gang? But it's just very convenient that this person they've been training for some time happens to be Vanek's son, who they're using as a hostage slash gang member for their trip to Fierda.
Right. Something I thought was interesting was uh, at this point in the story, I think we're on Jesper chapter.
Yes, chapter 8.
And this is essentially them breaking down the plan that they've had no time to come up with, but suddenly have it.
Yeah.
Uh, and I noted that it's interesting that the television show had to shoehorn in this book to make the Shadow and Bone plot more interesting.
Yeah.
Because this portion of the show was way more interesting than whatever the fuck the actual plot was.
Yeah.
Also, this whole sequence where they're talking about the plan and going over it reeks of Leigh Bardugo watching Ocean's 11 way too many times. because the amount of like self-congratulatory reiteration of the plan is disgusting. They're like,
Yeah.
and then we'll use this to do that, and they're like, oh yeah, to do that, and it's like, shut up.
Yeah.
Oh my, it was they do it like 4 times in this chapter where they're like, and then we'll sneak right in the front door. Like, yeah, right in the front door. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, it's pretty cringe. Um, but they're basically okay. I have the layout of the ice court as well.
Ooh, go on.
It looks like this. It looks like a cake.
Oh yeah,
But basically, like, see all the gates and shit, and then they gotta get in here. The White Court. Is that what it's called?
White Island.
Sorry, White Island, which is stop.
Not the white.
They have
Court.
other places called the Incinerator Shaft.
Wonder what that's for.
I know, right? Kennels, a training room, stables, and a sacred ash. But
Yeah, of course.
conveniently, there's a party being thrown while the heist is being planned.
Yeah. So they're like, we'll sneak in with a traveling like comedy troupe.
Yeah.
They'll probably hire stand-up comedians. We'll go in with them.
This reminds me though of like the episode in Shadow and Bone where they had the party where the dregs were gonna come steal Alina, but like the party was just like some people doing like sad aerial silks like in a stairway where no one was hanging out, and it was like why there of all places. Like they were just kind of like off to the side. There was like 3 people there.
Yeah. Basically, the plan that they detail doesn't matter because there's no sense of satisfaction from it because we haven't seen them plan it out. We're just being told what it is. Like, at least with Ocean's 11, they're like, okay, we're going to need this, this, and this. And then you go see them get those things. They're like, well, okay, we need a security badge for the such and such. So they seduce someone who works there to get his badge. They're just like, don't worry, everybody, I've figured it out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, the whole book could have been them planning this heist and then the climax be the heist. That's how it's supposed to go.
I know, and all it is now is just like, oh, don't worry, Wyland's been there. He's gonna make a map with Matthias, and like we'll get all that shit figured out on the way. We're going in as our true criminal selves into the prison. They're like, what do you mean into the prison? Kaz is like, chill, 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 chill. It's fine. I got this.
Be cool, my babies.
Yeah.
And
But this chapter may as well not be from anybody's perspective because we don't get any of Jesper's thoughts.
Yeah.
But really, like, the main piece of information is that, like, by some wild good fortune, there's this spring ceremony happening where the new Druskella are being initiated on White Island. And Matthias is like, it's not supposed to be a party. It is sacred. And they're like, but it's a party.
Yeah.
And like all the guests are coming from all over the world, and wouldn't you believe most of the entertainment is coming from Ketterdam?
It's so like the way that Matthias interacts with everyone in this scene reminds me of Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy, where they're like, and we'll sneak right in the front door, and he's like, you cannot do that. They will be expecting you. I'm like, shh, 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 shh. No one's talking to you.
Yeah. He's like, if you try to do anything with the gate, it will trigger Black Protocol.
Yeah.
They will
catch you immediately. They are too clever for such disguises.
Yeah.
Okay, dude. And then we've got a Kaz chapter that I definitely did not pay attention to. because I didn't take any notes for it.
Literally all that happens, it's like this book's version of when Ocean's 11 is like, okay, we need the security badge, we need this thing, we need this thing. Except all it is Kaz gives everybody a list of errands to run and supplies to buy. And basically
All right, and then meet back
we
at
don't
the
know what
boat.
any of those things are. And then he lets Matthias get him alone for a second because he knows Matthias is going to try and steal the pardon that he saw Kaz put into his special front pocket. But it turns out his special front pocket is extra special because it's like got little secret pockets inside
Yeah.
of pockets. And so Matthias is like, he punches him or something. Oh no, he puts his bare hand on Kaz's mouth, and
Yeah, and
Kaz is
he's like,
almost
"Ew,
dry
yuck."
heaving at the thought. Yeah, he's like, I have to overcome my retching. But then
And
yeah.
Matthias does the thing where he's like, "Where I saw you put it in your coat pocket. Where did you do with it?" And then
Yeah.
Kaz does that obnoxious Tom Cruise Mission Impossible thing in the first one where he like does sleight of hand where he's like, "Woo! It was never here. I can make
Yeah.
it do anything I want."
And he beats him up with his cane like pretty bad, I think.
Yeah.
Or at least hits him enough so that he's incapacitated.
Yeah, he gives
Because
him a
apparently
lesson.
his cane is Grisha made, like specific to bone breaking.
Yeah. All of that very convenient cool guy stuff.
Yeah, I just want to know more about Kaz being a big ass germaphobe. Like, how'd this happen?
It will probably never come up again.
I mean, to be fair, it's the olden times. I assume people's hands are disgusting. So I can understand, especially someone who, like, I don't know how much time has passed between them breaking him out of prison and getting to this place. Has he had time to wash his hands? I don't think so.
Here's a little thought exercise for in a let's say this is a similar to Victorian England, the 18
Right.
no
90s?
1890s,
Yeah.
where bathing was a privilege. We'll
Mm-hmm.
say not necessarily a given right, but it was something you could do when you were feeling, you know what,
Self-care night.
I'm gonna treat myself.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go get a
little
bath.
at-home spa. Yeah.
Is it possible for someone to be a germaphobe in a world where bathing is a special treat?
Well,
Because the concept of a germaphobe is purely modern.
that's right. The germs weren't a thing yet.
You need microscopes to
Because
learn what germs are.
yeah, we didn't know that you could prevent germs because we didn't know they existed.
Ha!
So
I've beaten
maybe is
you,
it
Leah.
just physical dirt on the hands then?
Could be.
Or is it just bare skin? Is it bare skin touching him at all?
It
Is
might
it
just be
has nothing
bare
to do
skin.
with
Because he
yeah,
makes
because
a
like
mention of skin on skin. Really bugs me.
yeah. Yeah.
But then we get an Inej chapter again, and we get some of her backstory, which, admittedly, I don't care about because I wrote another diatribe where I said all of the characters show the same symptoms of a plague that infects most modern fiction, where a tortured, tragic backstory is substituted for complex and interesting. They seem to think that tortured backstory equals complex character. And
Yeah.
that is constant throughout so much fiction these days. And it's not just this book, it's not just this kind of book. It's in television, it's in other books. It's rampant where you have your character has a very hard childhood and suddenly they're a very interesting character. When that's not the case. You can have a character who's interesting, who's had a very good childhood.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's certainly true, at least so far in the case of Inej.
And
But what I found weird is that like she just decides today of all days is personal challenge day. Like, why? You're on a time schedule.
yeah, and also like it is when all of the characters in your book have a tortured and hard life and backstory, then having those hard times be a motivator for the character loses all of its weight. If everybody has motivation tied to their tortured background, then nobody is interesting at all. They're all the same.
Yeah. And like that's the case for every character who said yes
Every
to this
character,
heist.
every character. Kaz clearly has a tortured backstory because he
hmm
thought a fucking ghost was his brother. Inej has a tortured background because she was a prostitute that she agreed to.
She agreed to? Do we know that for sure?
She made it seem like it. She said she signed the contract.
Oh.
Jasper is just tortured because he has gambling and drink problem.
Yeah, he's got debts.
Um, and I'm sure Waylon has a tortured background because he's the son of a very important man, and you know, privilege is a weight of its own.
I don't know how to live up to my dad's
I
expectations.
constantly live in the shadow of my dad. But this is when Inej talks about her blades named after Saint.
What's your favorite one?
I wasn't listening because as soon as she said Saint, I was like, shut up!
She named one after Alina. Do you want to know what happens at the end of the Shadow and Bone trilogy?
No, yeah.
So Alina stabs the Darkling and he dies. But before she does that, she loses all her power after stabbing Mal, who's the third amplifier, not a firebird. And he dies in her arms, and her power, her sun summoner power, disperses amongst all of these soldiers that are basically like the soldiers of the sun. And so all of them summon away all the Volcra. They destroy the fold, and she does not die. And Mal actually doesn't die either. He comes back to life because some Grisha perform necromancy, a thing that has happened never before and never since.
Love a good Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah, the Darkling dies. He's like, "What do you mean like this? We were supposed to live in eternity." And he dies, and then Alina tells like her crew there. She's like, "I died here. Just so everybody knows I'm dead." So they like take a girl who died and they fabricate her to make her look like Alina, and the Darkling and Alina are burned together on these twin pyres. And that's like the end. And then Alina and Mal get married. And they start an orphanage together, which is actually kind of cute. The ending of that book kind of got me in my feels a bit, and I wasn't expecting to, and I was really embarrassed. And I wasn't ever going to talk about it, but now I just have.
Yeah, now it's on.
But they're alive, and they're living in this little orphanage, and they're just being all cute and shit. But for all intents and purposes, Alina is dead. Nobody knows that she's alive without power. She has no more power.
So they canonized her.
Well, she was canonized even before she died. Like, her whole brand was about kind of being a saint. Yeah, the apparat kind of got a bit carried away. Well, it's kind of like the downfall of deifying yourself while you're still alive. Like, Nero tried to do that, and we all know how he ended up.
Yeah, true. Alina was pretty impressed with herself at one point, most points.
Mm-hmm.
But this chapter ends with Inej going back to the boat that everybody was supposed to meet at. And then it explodes!
Yeah.
And then it's another Jesper chapter. And a shootout starts after the boat explodes. So he's shooting at
Mhm.
everybody, and Kaz turns up at some point, and he goes, "What are you guys doing standing around?" And they're like, "You not see everybody fucking shooting at us?" And he's like, "Yeah, that was the decoy boat. The real one's over here." And
How
this
did
is
you get it? How did you get a decoy boat?
and this is when I said, "Okay, Leigh Bardugo, this is over designed. This is obfuscation for the sake of it."
Yeah.
How did there was no way he could have known that this roving gang of people were going to come kill them that was never even intimated before that other people might want to do this job. So they're going to kill him and his group so that they could do it or just stop them from doing it. It was
I don't
never
know.
explained, never even
No.
suggested before. And suddenly he has the prescience, the fucking Paul Atreides prescience. He's done seen it
Yeah.
to know that they're going to come for that boat. So his idea is to blow it up as his people are standing around it, and the people will be shooting from the other side of the dock.
Mhm.
To say that it's not thought out would be to give Leigh Bardugo too much.
Mhm.
Zero thought went, except for she wanted to blow up the boat,
Yeah, because she needed a good ending to that chapter.
only to make it like this is the second Jesper chapter we've had, and so far all of his chapters have been dog shit because Leigh Bardugo doesn't know what she's doing with this character.
No, not yet.
But basically, the chapter is just him shooting at these people and then talking to Waylon, who's sitting there cowering, and he's like, "Shoot or something. Here, take this rifle." And then he
Yeah.
tries to climb up the crow's nest of the boat and gets shot,
Yeah.
and then continues to climb despite being shot. And then the
In the
chapter ends.
leg.
Yeah.
I think Wyland sets off a flash bomb,
Oh yeah,
and then
flashbang. Yeah.
Jesper's like, "Good one," and
Nice.
then that's the end. And like this fight is still happening.
Yeah, we didn't really think it through because we wouldn't imagine an action scene lasting 3 chapters. So,
Certainly not
uh, we stop in the middle of an action scene.
of a gunfight with
Sorry.
bombs. So sorry, eh?
That's it, everybody. We did it. I'm actually enjoying this book. It's making me mad a
Same.
lot, but it's the good kind of mad.
Yeah.
Like, it's the kind of mad that I'm like, ooh, I can't wait for Wednesday. I'm gonna let it have it.
Yeah. It's not it's like the sweet spot between still having some good bones kind of and some good structure and being cringe enough that like it's fun to make fun of, and it's not at the other end of the spectrum where Kingdom of the Wicked sits where it's just demoralizing.
Yeah.
Like I've
Yeah.
never felt more fucking beleaguered reading a young adult fantasy book about like all the things that I should like witchcraft, Italian vibes, like corsets, like demon kings, whatever. Like that should have been fun. It sucked. It sucked the whole time.
Yeah. I don't think we bounced back from that moral devastation of Kingdom of the Wicked till really the blind bullet.
Yeah.
Like every book that we did after Kingdom of the Wicked was a bit of a slog.
Yeah.
And Mind Bullet, because it was so stupid, kind of bounced us back a little bit.
Yeah, it kind of revitalized us a bit, I think.
And this book is just the kind of breath of fresh air that I needed.
Mhm.
But we'll be doing chapters 12 through
23?
23. 2 weeks from now. And this episode will be up on YouTube next week. Keeping pretty good schedule with that, and I'm pleased.
Nice.
So when that goes up, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and like and watch it. It'd be great. I'd appreciate it.
Same.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in 2 weeks for more Six of Crows by Bardugo. It's gonna be fun. Bye, everybody.
Farewell.